Welcome to. I am Kevin Adkison, the curator for the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research. And today we are live at the Frank Lloyd Wright-designed Smith House. Now, I've been doing Live at 5 since March of 2020, but my loyal followers know that we've taken a bit of a break. And so today's Live at 5 is the first back in our newest series, in our 4th or 5th season, and we will be doing this for the next 6 weeks. And so I will again be bringing you stories of Cranbrook from around the entire educational community, and helping to highlight the amazing diversity of art, architecture, design, education, and science that make up the Cranbrook story. Now, today I am over off campus on the Frank Lloyd Wright-designed Smith House, and I wanted to share with you some stories about the Smiths as entertainers and how they actually lived in the house. So a lot of times when you go through a house museum, you see the family's things, you hear the family stories, but especially at Sarnan House or Cranbrook House, and even here at the Smith House, it's a lot about the design, it's about the sort of objects that are on display, and it's about the creation of the story. But what you don't hear as much about is how they lived in the house. Now, I'm lucky enough to be the curator of this home and to be able to spend sort of as much time, day or night, as I want to in the house. And one of the cool things that my colleagues and I love is to be here, in the winter when it's getting dark early, or if we have a late night project, to be in the house as the sun is setting, and to just be working in a Frank Lloyd Wright environment. And so next week on September 4th, 5th, and 6th, we are actually doing a pretty exciting program where instead of coming for just an hour-long tour or coming to the Smith House and being shuffled from room to room and then asked to leave, we are going to let you, a paying member of the general public, come to the Frank Lloyd Wright Smith House and stay as long as you want. And so we're calling the evening At Home with the Smiths, and we're really thinking of it as much of a tour. I will be on hand, Nina will be here, our collections interpreters, Elena and Matt, will be here. We're going to be sharing stories, we're going to be telling you things you learn on the tour, but we're also going to let you just spend time in the house at your own pace. And I think that actually is a better encapsulation of how the Smiths wanted their house to be used. Sarah and Melvin Smith, who built this house in 1950, were school teachers down in Detroit. Sarah at Marsh Elementary, Mr. Smith at Cody High School. And while they had their day jobs teaching, it was really the time they spent showing off their Frank Lloyd Wright-designed Smith House that I think was their greatest joy. Sarah Smith had wanted to be an actress, and she said that when she finally had this Frank Lloyd Wright house, she finally had her stage. She had her chance to perform. And so part of the life of this house, it's not just the story of Frank Lloyd Wright's architecture, of his building for the everyday man, for what he called, and what generally was known as the small house problem. It's also sort of the house as a place for entertaining. And so next week with our special event, we're going to be doing a lot of things that are inspired by how the Smiths entertained. And today for Live at 5, I thought that I would show you just a few stories. And I think I'll start, we'll be learning about how they ate, which was very typically mid-century. Think about the music. My longtime followers of Live will know that internet is my #1 enemy. And so I hope that you're sticking with me. Sometimes if you're watching this later or on YouTube, it will appear more seamless, but we are fighting with the internet connection yet again. Now, the Smiths loved music, and as evidenced by this This is a hi-fi from General Electric. It's actually a model that was built to be, or designed to be built in. And so you could actually have it with the cabinet or without. You could build it into whatever furniture you had. It is a little bit surprising to me with how much Frank Lloyd Wright loved built-ins and how many built-ins are in the house that Mr. Smith didn't choose to adapt his house and sneak the hi-fi in, because Mr. Smith made a lot of changes over the years of the house. But for whatever reason, it is a sort of intended to be built-in hi-fi that is sitting on this desk. Now, originally the desk was open below, and so the Smiths could have pulled up a chair and used it as a workspace, but these shelves were put in by Taliesin Associated Architects around 1968, and they are shelves for records. Now, those audiophiles watching, you might know that storing records horizontally like this is a terrible idea, but it is fitting with the sort of overall horizontality of the house. You have Frank Lloyd Wright's bookcases, his built-in banquette, the windows, even the fireplace horizontal. And so this the horizontal line is then even more enhanced by arranging our records on the horizontal plane. Now, what's cool about the hi-fi is it has the radio buttons up here, and then you can flip your records here. Now, the record play, it unfortunately doesn't work, and so for next week's event, we will be playing our music off of this beautiful Shinola record player. And Nina has been going through the records, and she selected Simon and Garfunkel for us today, in particular, their song, So Long, Frank Lloyd Wright. What we're going to let you do if you come to next week's event is actually flip through all of the Smiths records, and we are going to have a sort of play. You can flip through the type of whatever music you want to play, and the Smiths had pretty eclectic taste, whether that is opera and classical music or self-help books like How to Be a Jewish Mother. They also have a number of musicals from Oklahoma to South Pacific. We've got quite a bit of Babs. We have some different dance music, Glenn Miller, Mahalia Jackson, and then we also have spoken word records, which I invite any of you to get a ticket to At Home with the Smiths and then ask us to please read. Julie Harris reading poems and letters from Emily Dickinson, or a record I was especially excited to find, Frank Lloyd Wright, Record 1, reading from Walt Whitman. And so I don't know how often the Smiths, who loved to dance and loved music, were listening to their spoken word album of Frank Lloyd Wright, but we do have it here at the house, so we can listen to Frank Lloyd Wright reading Walt Whitman next evening. Now, we also have had the piano tuned, and so the piano will be available to play if you play piano. We're going to flip back the cover. Mrs. Smith played Beethoven every morning, but we also know that they had piano recitals in the house, and so we can pause the record player and you can play the Smiths' Steinway. Now, I hope the internet connection stays with us because I've come to the kitchen. I titled today's Live at 5 Menus and Music, and so we've seen some of their music collection. We've seen the records that you're going to come and flip through next week when you get a ticket to At Home with the Smiths. But now I want us to head in and think about what Mrs. Smith cooked here in the kitchen. To best of my knowledge, she called this a kitchen. Frank Lloyd Wright would have entitled this space, this room, a workspace. And he said that a kitchen implied you had a staff, and that in a Usonian style, a small 1,600 square foot like this, you would have no staff. So instead of a kitchen, you have a workspace. You see that as part of his lifelong commitment to destroying the sort of cellular nature of the Victorian home, the dining room, the living room, and the workspace all flow together. And the workspace is divided by this beautiful folding screen. The screen is original to the 1950 architecture. The arrangement, the mosaic on top of it, the assemblage is from 1976 by Cranbrook graduate Glenn Michaels. But what did she actually cook here? Well, on the table, we see the first hint, which are white grapes. And that's something that anyone who ever visited the Smiths knows. Sarah Smith loved to serve white grapes. I assume she always had them in the fridge. She would serve them with sickeningly sweet lemonade. Next week, we're going to have white grapes and lemonade for you to enjoy. These white grapes are plastic. I did not put them here myself. The Smiths actually had plastic white grapes as part of their decoration, so it was part of the collection. But then when it came time to cook a meal, Sarah Smith was not exactly a avid chef, an avid homemaker. In fact, when she first married Melvin Smith, World War II starts shortly after their marriage, and she becomes an army wife. She's stationed out in New Jersey at Atlantic City, and she decides to invite Melvin and a couple of officers over for dinner. And so about an hour before they get there, she puts the roast into the oven. And maybe you hear the problem. An hour before dinner is to be served, she starts the roast. She realizes her mistake and realizes, oh, roasts actually take a really long time to cook. And so she sort of looks at Melvin and they decide to stall the salad course. And so they eat intentionally, incredibly slowly, while she's just sort of hoping against all hope that that roast is going to cook quickly. Finally, someone sort of says, I'm kind of ready for dinner. Melvin may have even said, Sarah, I think we're ready for dinner. And she goes to the oven. The roast is completely undercooked. The vegetables are completely rock solid. She said someone tried to eat a potato and it flew off the plate. It was so hard. So Sarah has an inauspicious start to being a homemaker in her early days of marriage. And then looking through her cookbooks, I think we can see a lifelong dedication to hacks for meals. I imagine if she could have, she would have Uber Eated, but they didn't have that kind of money or technology. And so my colleague Nina Blomfield, who is on a 2-year fellowship here researching the Smith House and its collection, has pulled out some of these treasures from the library. I love this one, Mary and Russell Wright Guide to Easier Living. There's an ant crawling on this book. This book is actually in the New York Times just this morning as a reference book that's still relevant. Now, Mary and Russell Wright were a husband and wife duo who were really committed to sort of modernist living. You can see them on the back of the book. Now, they lived in suburban New York in Westchester County, and Russell Wright is really known for his ceramics. And here you can see a casserole dish from Russell Wright's line. It's part of the excuse me, that is the Heath ceramic. This is Russell Wright's casserole dish. It's part of a series of Russell Wright pieces that the Smiths had. You can see their tea set and sugar up here on the counter. And so this is a pretty iconic work of American home design. Which the Smiths were part of. Now, the other piece that they have on display is by Heath Ceramics. And Edith Heath was a bit of a frenemy of Russell Wright. And so Russell Wright and his line of ceramic home goods were made in New York. They're the sort of East Coast intersection of handmade and factory-made earthenware ceramics. And then on the West Coast in LA, you have Edith Heath making her kind of combination of studio pottery, handmade research into the forms, handmade done glazes that then become commercially produced. And I think what ultimately, the rivalry between Edith Heath and Russell Wright comes down to is both of them are promoting handmade ceramics, both of them are doing commercially made ceramics, and so they can find their own ways to nitpick. And what I think is interesting about the Smiths is that they collect both great rivals because they are both beautiful commercially made ceramics. So again, our Russell Wright casserole here, our Edith Heath casserole here, and then here is a casserole cookbook, but really there are all sorts of Sarah Smith's cookbooks. And next week we're going to let you flip through these cookbooks. We'll even have some recipe cards, so if you find in the Southern Living Microwave Cooking Made Easy cookbook a recipe that you can't live without, you'll be able to copy it down so that you can add it to your recipe collection. Now, the microwave cooking books would have been especially useful for the Smiths' Thermatronic by Thermador microwave, which they have here, no longer functioning, but I don't know if we plugged it in if it would be. I loved the electrical outlets on top of the microwave oven combo. And then some of the other cookbooks are pretty neat. Now, this is one of the older cookbooks in the house. This is The Glorious Art of Home Cooking by Hannah Dutald. Don't know much about the book. Great colonial revival-inspired spine. Great little colonial kitchen here with its hooked pots and kettles, pewter plates. But what's interesting about this book, rather than the rest of the sort of mid-century cookbooks, is it's a little bit older. And it was given to Sarah Smith on March 20th, 1940, which is her wedding to Melvin. And so this is one of the wedding gifts from Sarah, or to Sarah, and it says, May this glorious art of home cooking always be to you a joyous task, from Lillian. So if anyone watching knows who Lillian might be, it would be great to know. And you can see that tipped into the book is a little handwritten recipe from Sarah Smith. Now, this is a more classic cookbook, sort of French-American cuisine. I think what Sarah might have found more useful, because she never becomes much of a chef, are books like the Keep It Short and Simple cookbook, or Dinner Against the Clock, quick, sumptuous meals with the look and taste of infinite leisure, or the Budget Gourmet, or Michigan Cooks Collection, which I actually have its companion series, the Georgia Peach Cookbook, from my grandmother. Over here we have 365 ways to cook hamburger. I mean, look at how tempting that cover art is. Yum. Or 365 ways to cook chicken. And it could be from one of these cookbooks that Sarah Smith got some of her infamous recipes, like taking a whole frozen chicken, putting it into a half dozen cans of cream of mushroom soup, and letting it boil. Another famous meal that she had was hot dogs. Just she and Mr. Smith allegedly split half a hot dog, or simple things like corn on the cob. And next week we're going to be serving you half a hot dog and corn on the cob as part of the event. Now, a telltale sign about these is if you have a parent, or if you love to cook, a grandparent, and they have a cookbook recipe library, one thing you would expect to see is any sign of use along the spine. And so as we look at these on Facebook Live, we can see there's not a lot of evidence, no grease stain, no water splatter, and hardly any spine opened very far. So who knows how much these cookbooks were of use to Sarah, but I think they tell a story of life at mid-century here in the Smith house. Now, this is their Osterizer Imperial 8, their blender, pretty beautiful blender, sitting here under the counter. And there are amazing cookbooks just for the blender. You have Mary Mead's Magic Recipes, a cookbook for the electric blender, which notice it has a different version of the Osterizer on the cover, or the Gourmet International Blending, the fine art of modern blending. And what also came along with these pieces are little pamphlets. I love the graphic design of this one. Serve soup today, the Osterizer spin cookery way, with our charming little chef. And all of you, just so you know, this recipe will pause on screen because I know you're going to want to copy it down. Maybe we'll just post it direct to Facebook, because I could not be more tempted by King Neptune's Delight. 2 cups of milk, 4.5 ounces canned oysters and juice, 10 ounces canned condensed mushroom soup, 4-ounce can of shrimp, 2 sprigs of parsley, 1 slice of green pepper, you don't want it to be too spicy, 1 thin onion, dash of Tabasco sauce, curry powder, salt, and sherry. There could be nothing more tempting than that King Neptune's Delight blended meal. And if any of you dare make that, more power to you. And if you dare make that and bring it to my house, I will not open the door. That sounds awful. And then just a couple more of the cookbooks that Nina and Claire have chosen for us today. Another blender cookbook here with Meal in a Minute. Who Needs More Than Orange Juice, Egg Yolks, and Honey Wheat Germ, are the Dietini, which is leading us into a whole nother section of the kitchen books, like this accompaniment to the VHS set, The Beautiful Machine, or the Ladies' Home Journal Family Diet Book, and the low cholesterol menus and recipes. And what do things like this show us but that the Smiths, who live in this Frank Lloyd Wright house, who live in this sort of idea that art and architecture should be one, we should surround ourselves with beauty, are also part of mass culture. You know, the Smiths really came from nothing. They are building a middle-class house here in the suburbs of Detroit, and they are participating in all of the trends, healthy and not, of the suburbs, and so of the mid-century suburb. And so those diet books really show us that, you know, this kind of inescapable idea of bettering yourself, of sort of using food, starving yourself, these sort of unhealthy mid-century trends. Sarah was reading about them. Who knows if she was participating or not? She always looked pretty healthy, pretty tiny herself. But so next week you can choose a record, you can peruse a cookbook, you can copy down a recipe, and then in the back of the house we're also going to be reactivating their television. And so here you can see Frank Lloyd Wright on What's My Line from the 1950s. Frank Lloyd Wright, the consummate professional at making himself a celebrity, really our first celebrity architect. And The Smiths had multiple TVs in the house. This is the only one that came to us as a museum, but we know that they loved to watch TV. They loved their soap operas, they loved Young and the Restless, and so we're going to have a number of their programs being shown during the course of next week's event. And usually Live at 5 is just me, but I am joined by some of my coworkers here who just figured out how to project Frank Lloyd Wright onto the TV. So congratulations to all of you for figuring out a wonderful idea. I hope that today's Live at 5 has given you a taste of what next week's event is going to be. It's not all about just learning the stories of the artist, the stories of the architect, the stories of the Smith. It's about enjoying the house as they would, circa 1975, 1980. If you want to get dressed up, we will all be wearing our best 70s inspired clothing. We'll also be having our 70s inspired food. We are going to 70s, and you can see already some of our lawn darts and chairs borrowed from Darren Linhart's grandmother in her place up north. That leads me to my next request, which if you are watching this before September 4th and you have anything up north or at your own house that would help us establish our festive 1970s garden party, when we look through the photos in Cranbrook archives of how the Smiths used the house, how they lived here, it looks like a church potluck or a temple potluck. It looks like the kind of thing where all the neighbors are just lugging over the card table and mismatched chairs. And I don't have that stuff, nor would we sit in it if we did have it as a museum. So I am borrowing, and stealing. If you have plastic tablecloths, plastic placemats, if you have anything that can help us build the 1970s vibe for our garden port party side of the event, send me a message. We would love to borrow it for 3 days. Kurt Catallo, who's the uncle of our wonderful summer intern Claire Catallo, will be bringing some of his vintage 1970s cars over. It really is promising to be a pretty amazing series of 3 nights. Again, it's September 4th, 5th, and 6th. Tickets start at 4:30 p.m. and the last ticket is at 7 or 7:30 p.m. It's $40 a person, and you will stay as long as you like. Buses will shuttle you from Cranbrook House every 30 minutes, and so it is a non-traditional tour, a self-guided tour, but also with a lot of activities, food, drink, music, and games. And there are limited amount of tickets left, so head over to center.cranbrook.edu to purchase your ticket today. And hopefully, it looks like it's going to be a great crowd, great weather, and I really hope this is an opportunity for us to not only experience the house, experience the collection, learn more about life in America in the 1970s, learn more about the Smiths, but also to make new friends. And so please come, bring your friends and family. It's an interesting guest list already. It will be better with you on it. And so come sit in the garden for a while and hang out at home with the Smiths. And it's also September 6th, 7th, and 8th, not the 4th, 5th, and 6th. Thank you, Leslie, for correcting me. It is next Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. It is not on Labor Day. I will be in Saugatuck, so don't find me here. But again, those tickets will be available on center.cranbrook.edu. If you are watching this later in the game, you missed a great event. If you're watching it next week and the tickets are sold, call the center. We can sell you a ticket once the website has closed if the event's not over. It's wonderful to be back with Live at 5. Next week, I will be live again from Smith House from the event, and so I will be tempting you to buy a ticket. And then after that, we're going to have a few more weeks of Live at 5 coming from different corners of campus. Again, I am Kevin Adkisson, curator with the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research, inviting you to come to Cranbrook for any occasion, a walk, a tour, but especially this week to come to At Home with the Smiths, where we will even have a little photo booth where you can wear a hat like Frank Lloyd Wright, or you can eat corn on the cob, which we have a picture of Frank Lloyd Wright eating corn on the cob in this corner, and so we are prepared for you to reenact that image for your Instagram. So come on out, see you then, and in the meantime, I'll be back next Wednesday at 5 o'clock for another Live at 5.